and welcome to the show with me, Jillian Godsil. Today, my guest is Hugo Philion, co-founder and CEO of Flare Networks. So, Hugo, I want to ask a question. What on earth made you and your two co-founders decide you wanted to create a Layer 1 blockchain? What possessed you?
Well, as you know, there's a lot of Layer 1 blockchains out there. However, most of them are dealing with sort of various aspects that are not necessarily perfect in our industry today. So you've got newer blockchains focused around scaling. You've got other blockchains focused around different types of scaling, sharding, zero knowledge proofs, each trying to do, their own thing. Just scaling by itself doesn't necessarily lead to more utility for the industry, because currently blockchains are quite limited in actually what they can do. Essentially, they're a ledger, and they can confirm what has happened on that ledger. They can come to consensus over it. That's a perfectly great utility, but it's not necessarily a utility that by itself can scale to offer products to the entire population of the world. And ultimately, that is what we want out of this new technology. So really what Flare is trying to attack is not the scaling problem. Ultimately, the scaling problem will become a commodity in the same way that, we all use algorithms that are today essentially commodities, they're standard practice. And so we don't think there's much marginal benefit to trying to tackle the scaling problem. Whoever tackles it first will only have a short sort of advantage. It'll be any truly competent scaling mechanism will be absorbed by everything else out there very quickly. What we're trying to do is tackle the utility problem of blockchain, which is at the moment you only have really one major product, DeFi. I wouldn't even call it a use case. I'd call it a set of primitives with some limited usage. But we think that both DeFi and the use of decentralized blockchains can be essentially rolled out to a much larger number of people if you have one additional thing, which is as much data as possible. And so Flare is the blockchain for data. It has native protocols to be able to come to consensus over and absorb essentially data from external systems, both blockchains and just Web 2 APIs. We think that that gives developers the ability to build much more interesting applications. And then we think that those applications therefore have the chance to actually gain a very large user base.
Okay, that's really interesting. Data, not scaling, data, not not just DeFi. So you also built, when you created your architecture, you created a test net as well, a canary network. Why did you create that, and what influenced you there?
So yes, Flare's canary net Songbird has been out since September 2021. Songbird exists both to allow us as the Flare Foundation to test our protocols in the wild, meaning on a blockchain where value exists. So this goes beyond testing a protocol on, say, a network where no value exists, where there's very little incentive for people to, I suppose, try to undermine the protocol. It also allows us to observe whether our analysis of human behavior, participant behavior, is correct. As you know, all blockchains rely on some form of game theory for safety or consensus, or whatever protocol you're building. Ultimately, it's got to be used by people, and it usually you want to be able to see the interactions of that usage. Songbird for us has been extremely useful there, and it's also built to allow developers who build within the Flare ecosystem to test their protocols on Songbird first, before transitioning to our mainnet Flare. As importantly, Songbird is a governance network for Flare. So it's the first step of community governance in the Flare governance mechanism. So we have a lower house, which is Songbird, and an upper house, which is Flare, very much a bicameral system. And then lastly, what's most important about Flare is because it has these data protocols, one of those data protocols allows Flare and Songbird to be able to essentially prove what has happened on another blockchain onto the chain. So having that going both ways between Flare and Songbird also could allow Songbird to be essentially a viable L2 for additional compute on Flare. So essentially 3 roles: CanaryNet, governance, and L2.
Okay, I didn't realize all 3 of them were in there. With the feedback, having that CanaryNet, has that changed the ambitions of the Flare network from the beginning to now?
So I don't think the CanaryNet has, but it has been absolutely excellent for analyzing one of our data providing protocols called the Flare Time Series Oracle. We've already suggested through governance several major changes to that protocol, and there are likely to be a few more. I think our ambitions expanded before we got to Songbird. So originally, Flare was built to be essentially a layer 2 for a particular blockchain called XRP. Flare is now the blockchain for data. It is its own layer 1, and that gives rise to interoperability, both with other blockchains and with the internet.
So tell me about the recent airdrop. What happened? What went right? What went wrong? And where are we now?
So the distribution went out to essentially about 350,000 addresses, every major exchange in the industry, and is one of the largest and widest and most sort of decentralized token distributions in the history of crypto. So that also meant that Flare got massive support from exchanges. It's listed across many, many different exchanges. Pretty much every major exchange, barring Coinbase and Binance. Coinbase have confirmed that they will be distributing and listing the token, which is a good result for the network and for the community. We distributed 15% of what will be distributed to the public on the distribution date. And the remaining 85% of that distribution can be earned over 36 months by wrapping your Flare on the network. So it's earned pro rata. So if you are 10% of what is wrapped, you earn 10% of that month's distribution. The same the following month, the same the following month, and so on for 36 months. So it's very much sort of modeled after the Bitcoin kind of mentality, where you have relatively high inflation in the early days for people that contribute to the network, in the early days. And that's very, that's a very important aspect. We want to grow the community as quickly as possible. We want that community to be able to partake in the network by wrapping their Flare. If you wrap your Flare, you can still use it in applications, so long as they support the distribution back to wrap Flare holders, which is a really important thing because it doesn't undermine the utility of the network.
So Flare says connect everything. Going back to your original point, you're the blockchain for data. So is that your killer approach, if you like? Because we all want mass adoption. DeFi is great, but as you say, it's not necessarily the be all and end all. So how will having that data, what will people build with it? What's your vision to create mass adoption through being the blockchain for data?
So I think when it comes to these kind of things, it's impossible to know what people will build to it ahead of time, and impossible to know what will be the killer app. In a way, I'm not sure that the people that built YouTube realized that would be almost one of the largest properties on the internet. In the same way, perhaps Facebook also maybe didn't realize the scale of the thing they were doing. So, what we're looking for with the blockchain for data is to enable people to be able to take data from other places and use that on a blockchain. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means you can use identity. It means you can plug into games. You can plug into social media networks. You can plug into any data source, maybe the DMV, assuming it's an open data source, maybe open banking. And this then allows people to create applications where DeFi then becomes relevant to them. So imagine you're someone that is playing a game and you wish to buy an in-game asset, but you don't have the requisite token for that. That's where getting that token from DeFi is valuable to you. You buy an in-game asset, maybe you earn something in a play-to-earn game, and you can then realize that profit from your earnings back through DeFi. That at scale is extremely compelling. Today, however, DeFi is extremely limited in its utility because it cannot really be used broadly. And it's also just not that appealing. So we think by essentially providing a monetization layer in blockchain for existing Web 2 properties, then you've got a real inroad into mass adoption. So that's our play.
Bringing Web 2 to Web 3, which is obviously a bit of a holy grail. We need to do that. So how are the community responding to your activities so far? What kind of feedback are you getting?
So our community is large, voracious for information, intensely critical when something happens that is not necessarily perfect, and rightly so. And however, we just had on Friday night the culmination of the vote to change the distribution to the mechanics I previously described in this interview. That we essentially didn't participate. There was some very minimal participation from our team, so we didn't vote really, and it passed with a 93% majority. So community clearly expressing their support for what we're doing, voracious for applications to launch on the network, voracious for the the functionality that is offered by Flare to unfold and be used. And of course, as a foundation, we are supporting any developer, any credible developer that wants to build around the network with grants, potentially investments. We're looking for partnerships with companies and with other blockchains, as interoperability in our space is key.
That's so cool. So people want to find you. Where do they find you to talk about partnerships, building on the network, etc.?
Flare.network is our website. It has a grants portal where you can send an email to us essentially with a quick summary of your project. We're very large on Telegram. We have a very large Telegram group. We have a very large Twitter presence. We have a Discord. You can also email info@flare.network, and we'd be delighted to hear from you.
Brilliant. Well, blockchain for data, I'm looking forward to seeing the applications that are going to start building on Flare. Thank you so much for your time, Hugo. And thank you for everybody listening. Thank you indeed.
Thank you.